Welcome back, friends, to another episode of the Biz Bitch podcast. I am so happy you are here, as always, showing up for yourself as an entrepreneur, showing up for this community and this movement, and showing up for these incredible women that take their time out of their days to be on my podcast. I am so excited for today's conversation, and in a few different ways. It's no doubt we are living in a culture that is wildly obsessed with health and wellness, to a point where I think it can actually be healthy and unhealthy in a lot of ways. And even for me as a girl living in SoCal, which I think we're amplified on the wellness side of things, I think it's easy to get caught up in the noise of all that there is out there, all the fads, all the influencers telling you what you should be eating, should be doing, and all the supplements you should be buying. Which is why I love today's conversation, because it's backed by data and backed by things that are actually true and how you can take care of yourself, but not take it to a side of being obsessed with it, let's say. So today's conversation is going to be all about health, wellness, but it's going to be about genetics, prevention. We're going to talk about Alzheimer's risk, because you'll get to hear a little bit of my story and my dad's story, cancer, and having traumatic things like your father's being sick at really pivotal points in your life. Talking a little bit about women in STEM and what it's like to show up in that space, and just to how to fully live without living in fear. So our guest today, I heard speak last week. It's only been a week. Up at another event in Orange County, and I was truly blown away by you and the way you presented something I think that could be so boring. It could quickly switch into like a lecture, and you brought it into something that felt so digestible and so focused towards women just understanding taking care of ourselves, and something that didn't feel like it was a forced thing or something that we had to live in fear of. It was like, how can we help ourselves and how can we get to that other side and just understand more what's going on in our bodies? So today I have Miss Natalie speaking on our podcast, and we're going to dive into a few different worlds. But before we do that, introduce yourself. Who are you?
Well, thank you so much for saying that too. I think, my mission is to really make the complex and the boring digestible and fun. So I'm a board certified genetic counselor, and not a lot of people know what that means.
I was going to say, so tell us what that means.
Yeah. So basically, genetic counselors are master's level trained in genetics and psychology. It's a really interesting degree. It's very niche. Most class sizes maximum are 20 students. So
That's crazy.
Compared to nursing and, other healthcare fields, our class size was 20, but most are like around 6. So very niche. And what's interesting is that because our degree is very heavy in science, the genetics piece, but because it has that psychology piece, it's actually, I love, that's what really pulled me to it. We're trained to understand people's DNA, but then learn how to communicate about it. And I'm sure we'll get into, some of these conversations can sometimes be hard. So that's where the psychology can really come into play, and us being with the patient and really being, like a grounded presence and working through what the information means to them. So that is, after graduating, I did pursue some more integrative training to kind of bring more of a holistic perspective to that world. But that's a little bit of my background from a science perspective.
So you went essentially straight from school into kind of this world. And something you had shared the other day, which I thought was really interesting, is you worked in traditional hospital, like a really nice, expensive hospital, yet you still felt like they were lacking a huge piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, 100%. Exactly. When I was working at the hospital, I feel like I came in very starry-eyed.
Grey's Anatomy? What?
Yeah, exactly. Like a hospital. See my own patients. Literally was expecting Grey's.
Yeah.
There's no drama like that at the hospital. By the way, I'm like, is anyone in a relationship? No one is. But, so growing up, I grew up with parents who did really prioritize holistic health. Should I go into a little bit of my story with that? Yeah. Okay. So basically, when I was growing up, my brother was diagnosed with kind of a whole host of mental health disorders, it's hard to get a diagnosis there, but bipolar, autism spectrum disorder, a lot were thrown around. And he was essentially put on multiple medications. And he just started feeling like he was living his life from a very numbed point of view and really didn't feel like himself. With the help of my amazing mom as well, when he was little, he was transferred to working with a nutritional psychiatrist. And his nutritional psychiatrist helped him get off all medications and utilize supplements and nutrition and lifestyle
That's amazing.
to support that. And
Yeah.
he's still, he's still really not on traditional medications now. And so I saw growing up how important nutrition, lifestyle, and supplementation can be. Alongside of that, my parents, very hippie in NorCal, they loved eating healthy and working out. So as I was at the same time, though, I also was in kind of an academic family. My father is a biomedical engineer. So I feel like we were in the academia world.
For sure.
So, yeah.
Which is interesting to have both sides, I feel like, the academia plus the natural side, because a lot of the times they don't really share similar beliefs in a lot of ways.
100%. Yeah, it felt like I do feel like I grew up in this weird kind of dichotomy of, and where was I supposed to go and what was I supposed to do with that?
Yeah.
So I ended up pursuing more of the traditional path and going through my undergrad with a biology degree. And I was always like the perfectionistic, and it's hard like when you're in, and I know we'll probably talk about that, women in STEM, and I feel like I could go on a lot. Felt like always like had to get the A's. And anyway, so long story short, after I graduated from my master's program, going in the hospital, I was so excited. I was like, okay, all my hard work has finally paid off. I can see my patients independently. I'm going to change their lives, And so my job was I basically was a genetic counselor in oncology and dementia and Alzheimer's. And so I shared this at the talk, but basically my role was to assess individuals' risk, or basically someone would come to me with a diagnosis and I would be the one to tell them if their diagnosis was genetic in nature or had a genetic predisposition if they had one. And then after, I would oftentimes be referred to their family members, usually like their younger family members, to assess if their family members had risk, even though they didn't have a diagnosis yet. And that's when I started to feel this disconnect because through the traditional hospital lens, I was trained to basically tell them, those individuals who maybe had risk, that they had to do screenings or surgeries or pharmaceuticals, and that was it. And I was like, well, why aren't we talking about nutrition, lifestyle, supplementation, and stress and mental health? Because we know, I'm like, everyone knows, you can even Google it. Like, we know that these factors play a role in risk. And like I brought this up to the higher ups kind of, and it's hard. I mean, I know it's a systematic issue. I don't think it's anyone's individual fault,
And a really old systematic issue with so many layers.
Exactly. Yeah. And I fully think that modern medicine is amazing.
Yeah.
And I also feel like I think that we've also disconnected a little from like being in touch with our bodies in a way.
100%.
Yeah.
It's two things came up for me with you sharing that. Now, I also grew up with a very, not like woo-woo family, but a naturopath. Like my head growing up, going to the doctor was always a naturopath. Like I don't have memories really of going into standardized healthcare hospitals. I can tell you Dr. Spidell was my mom's naturopath. That's where I went when I was sick. I know what the office looks like. I knew how he treated. And for me, that was normal. My grandmas on both sides, my grandma on my mom's side always had these little like potions and things growing and like supplements and tinctures that she was always shoving down us growing up. And then on my dad's side, more the Mexican side, same, but a little bit more of like the Mexican culture, like the witch doctor side of it. And I grew up around this and thinking this was normal healthcare and this is how we take care of ourselves. And then coming into a, I guess, more adult life, normal world where things were happening with my body, that I needed to go into more traditional care, it felt weird and felt like, and I want to say this because I know doctors do care. I do know that they truly care, but sometimes it just feels like you're a number. They think they get like everything they were trained with, read it off in a script and shove you out the door. And you're like, they've said it a million times that day to so many people. It's the first time you're hearing it and it's the first time you're dealing with it. And so I think for me, hearing like that side of it was the most interesting part, and how that your family almost combined both sides and used the more natural treatment to help your brother, because I know I have so many friends who suffer from depression, anxiety, and the amount of pills that they're all on makes me so sad. And I know they need something. I just wish that it was cheaper and easier to get a hold of the things that could really help them.
Exactly.
And then you just saying that you sat down with families with like Alzheimer's, and I'm like cancer, and that I really don't remember having that conversation with anyone, because my dad had early onset and I don't think anyone sat me down and was like, hey, we should talk about you. And I feel like I need to ask my mom, because I was not young, young. I mean, I was like 18, 20 to like, so like I would
Mhm.
remember.
Yeah.
I feel like I was a little bit in like a part of life where I was a little selfish. So I wasn't like
Mm.
super diving into it. But I really don't feel like anyone ever sat down with me when my dad had cancer twice and then Alzheimer's and
Mhm.
dementia to sit down and be like, by the way, what do we need to do to help you? Or like, what should we look into? And so even the fact that you were part of that role, but it's not something given to everybody going through these is pretty
Mhm.
wild to me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
No, I love and thank you so much for sharing because both of those, as family members and for the patient going through it, I found that it's so confusing
Ugh,
and
yeah.
complex. It's so confusing. And I even as being like a family member of someone who's gone through those diseases
Mhm.
too, I'm like, oh my gosh, what's going on? Even someone in healthcare.
Yeah.
So it's so confusing. So I realized, of course, like staying in scope, but
Mhm.
realized like that role for me. And we're lucky because we get time with the patient.
Mhm.
So even at the hospital, I will say I was so lucky because we got hour appointments.
Yeah.
And
That's enough time to actually dive in deeper.
yeah, and say
Yeah.
like, "What questions do you have? What's going on?" Instead of just like telling you what to do.
Yeah.
Which I think a lot of like in med, that's hard to as a provider. I
Yeah.
think it's oftentimes like just tell them what to do and then done.
Yeah.
And we got the opportunity to be like, "How are you feeling? What are you confused about?" Like asking
Yeah.
questions first.
Yeah. So actually you kind of touched on it a little bit. While you're going through school and while this is something you're learning about and diving in, and were you already working in oncology when your dad first was diagnosed with cancer?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, which was such an interesting experience.
Yeah.
I think really helpful for my
And how
family.
old were you?
So I would have been around like 27,
Okay.
I want to say. Yeah, 27, 28. And so basically, when I was working at the
Mhm.
hospital, my father was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer.
Mhm.
Being so, really having my role flip from provider to
Mhm.
patient. I think it was really helpful as someone being in healthcare, but it was also just I now got to see the system from another
Yeah.
perspective. And, again, there's so many things that I have so much respect for, which is again like the integrative piece. Like, we are actually really grateful that he responded to hormone replacement therapy and chemo,
Mm.
and obviously that's been so helpful. And at the same time, I saw the lack of discussion
Yeah.
of nutrition, lifestyle, mental health. No one was there to like,
Yeah.
I even remember it was like, like even just the provider being like, "Oh, you have stage 4 cancer. Now we're gonna do this, this, and this," and it was like no time for my dad to even absorb what was
Yeah,
going on.
process. Yeah, there's no
Yeah,
processing time. It's like
yeah,
next beat and you're just like
yeah,
getting hit with this wave
and you're like, "What
almost
does that
of
even
just
mean?"
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Cuz also like we
crazy.
hear stage 4 but like what does that mean?
Yeah, what
If you
does it
don't
even
know
mean?
what that means, you don't know
Exactly,
what that means. And it's like give me a
exactly.
moment and even those of you in the medical field are still like what does
Mhm,
stage 4 mean? Like
totally.
what level and
Yeah,
what are all the things that we need to do?
exactly.
Taking yourself out of being at work and what you were doing, how do you like taking that home? And so you're trying to care for people in your profession and then also at home dealing with it
Mm,
like personally affecting in your whole life with your family and navigating all of those.
mm,
How do you think it affected you in the good, the bad,
mm.
and the I'm still trying to figure out what that means?
Good question. Yeah, gosh. And it's still like a work
Well,
in
yeah, no, it's like still,
progress.
and also you're still work in
It's
progress,
yeah,
right?
totally. Yeah, I think just I think I didn't realize that going into like a profession where you're talking, it's like I guess it's a helping profession.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize how much I would have to do my own internal work to
Mm-hmm.
be able to do it.
Yeah.
And I mean, it makes sense when you think about it, but the amount of work that I just had to do to be really able to be present with the patient and not honestly like take it home
Sure.
because I already had to carry.
Absolutely.
I came up with a mantra when I was at the hospital. It was I can care without caring because it was so hard
I
for
love that.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, well, how can I be empathetic?
I think a lot of nurses and people in those kinds of industries really need that mantra. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think probably women in general,
Yeah. Yeah.
honestly.
We want to take on everybody's pain and caring.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we're kind of trained to like, I think for me, I was like, that's what empathy is to
Hmm.
take on what they're feeling so
Hmm.
you can really help them. But then I realized actually that's not helping anyone because two sinking ships
Yeah.
isn't better than
Hmm.
one. So I feel like, and I'm still really still learning that, but I feel like being with those patients and at the same time I do feel like it was really healing because I did get to connect with them on a deeper level
Hmm.
and do think it's like where my passion really comes from too when I'm working with people because I'm
Yeah.
like I know exactly what how you're feeling right now and I know everyone's experience is different but like from a standpoint of I know what you're going through. I really like can understand and I want to support you in that,
Yeah.
So
Which I think that shows so much character for who you are and how you've navigated to show up, because I even think about me. Sometimes I
mm,
feel like in certain situations, if I hear Alzheimer's, the wave of the emotion just like comes up
mhm,
inside of me where I don't think about it often. And my dad did pass away from it. So it is slightly different because I carry a big
yeah,
trauma, and it was only 62. So it was a very young age and I processed. But
mhm,
now I'll never forget 2 years ago, my friend was getting married and her dad, was in, I'd say, a later progression of Alzheimer's. Yeah, he was still
mhm,
there, but some of his speech had started to go away. And I was at this wedding, and he had tried to do a speech for his daughter at the wedding. And I just started bawling, just like absolutely
mhm,
bawling. And I was like,
yeah,
I thought I was okay. Like, what
mhm,
happened here? And so
yeah,
to be able to be facing it, talking about it all
mm,
day, and in what you do today while your dad is still going through these treatments, I think
mhm.
it shows how strong you are to be able to like put those different things in different departments.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I feel like I totally resonate with that.
Yeah.
And I feel like, yeah, just, really the support
Mm,
system. I feel like being surrounded by other people. And yeah, I think what you said too is like, I feel like it's a balance between not in healthcare. I feel like I faced this point,
mhm,
honestly, where I was like, do I close my heart and become numb? Or do I like keep my heart open and like work through the way that I can still
mm,
be with these
mhm.
people. Because I actually started noticing being like, okay, if I stop caring
Yeah.
at all, then it'll be easier for
Yeah,
me,
sure.
you
I mean,
know?
it makes sense. It sucks, but it makes
Yeah,
sense. Yeah.
yeah, and I honestly think that I started, like, seeing that in the healthcare system where I was like, "Oh, I feel like some people have, like, around me, some doctors," and,
Mhm.
not everyone does this, but, like, they've gotten to that point where they're like, "I can't care anymore, I'm becoming numb." It's like a
Sure.
protection, and I remember having this point where I was like, I'm not gonna be a provider who does that, so, like, how do I stay open but also,
Mm,
like, protect,
yeah.
like, and boundary set and all the
Yeah.
things? Yeah.
I feel like as entrepreneurs, honestly, in a lot of industries, and I talk about this a lot with different friends who host community like I do, or
Mhm.
they're, you know, in a health or wellness space or therapist. It's like you almost have to go in with this little bubble around you first,
Yeah.
put your
Yep.
protection on,
Yeah.
and then jump into where you're about to jump into and know,
Mhm.
let it absorb care, but have enough of a boundary and a bubble around you to where it doesn't just completely take you out and completely wipe you out or make you have the breakdown to where then you need all the health care because you have completely just dove in too much. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, the bubble exercise.
Yeah.
So good.
Constantly
We're
working on
throwing it
her.
up.
There's
Yeah.
the bubble exercise. There's the other one, which I've heard like in between client calls, to wash your hands
So
as just a
good.
sign of like to move the energy like from
Yeah.
different things.
So good.
And I think sometimes those exercises are so, so important for all of
So
us. Yeah.
yeah, because I feel like it's so true. Just like really like, okay, none of this like this energy isn't mine,
Yeah.
and it's so freeing sometimes to be like, oh, I can release it.
Yeah. So going from working in the traditional hospital to venturing into your own world, which is
Mhm.
a really big, scary world for women in STEM, and
Mm.
also just being an entrepreneur, but also such a regulated industries. It's a really big jump. I was like, I'm trying to piece together how old you are. And I was trying
I'm 30.
30.
Yeah.
Okay. See, you're older than I thought you were.
Yeah.
I was trying, me and Lex the other day were like, how old do you think she is?
Everyone thinks I'm younger
Yeah.
because
I was
I
like,
have a baby face ever since I was little.
what kind of supplements is she taking? She
I'm
still
like,
looks
I'm
so
60.
she still looks so good. Okay, so 30. So jumping from working full-time in a hospital to being the entrepreneur at 30 years old, which is kind of like it's still young because same, I did it around like the similar age, but it's still also it's a really big jump because you haven't been in these careers for 10, 20 years, right? To where that's where a lot of
Mhm.
people feel like you have to prove something so much, learn
Mhm.
everything before we're allowed to go teach and educate and dive into these industries. So, what was that journey for you, and when was that moment of like, I have to go do something big, I have to show up larger?
Okay, I love this question. I love what you said too, because when I was first voicing that I wanted to start my practice, the amount of people that said I was too young,
Mm,
that I needed to stay in the hospital longer to
mhm.
get experience, like all of these things, do it after. Everyone had an opinion of how I should wait. And I'm so glad I didn't take that advice, honestly.
Sometimes I think it's their own fear and their own jealousy, to be
Yeah.
honest, like
Hmm.
showing up inside of them and why they project that on us.
Yeah.
But yeah,
That makes so much sense.
yeah.
And I think also like being in, again, like I mentioned with my family being in academia, a lot. It's like we already have the kind of prove your worth, and then academia is really heavy in that. And I feel
Mhm.
like no one talks about this,
Yeah.
but everyone's always like, what degrees do you have? How many? It's like, it's never enough. Like,
Yeah.
oh, you have a PhD. Why don't you have 2
Yeah.
PhDs? Oh, why aren't you a professor?
Mhm.
How many
Mhm.
papers have you published? It's like always prove.
Mhm.
And so I think there was a lot of that too, like, oh no, you need to prove that you're worthy to have a practice by staying in the hospital for 10
Mhm.
years,
Yeah.
and I was like, I can't do it. But I think that I never have talked about this like really too in depth of like why I actually did it. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs have this, but I think like honestly, growing up, I felt like I had a journey with anxiety
Mhm.
myself. A lot of like factors in my family. Like now, I've obviously like looked at my childhood. I'm like, makes sense. I love my family, but I'm like, we all have. So I had this like kind of fear, like honestly, when I was so little, like probably when I was 5, where I was like, what's the meaning of life? Like I was
Mm.
having these like very existential
Those
crisis
are some really big
anxieties.
thoughts to have at 5 years old.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, they were, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Like big,
A lot
like
of weight to
where,
put on yourself. Yeah.
yeah. And I think throughout my life, my answer kind of became like, oh, just like I just felt like this really like intense need to make a big impact on the
Mhm.
world.
Mhm.
And I was like, I have to do it like somehow in some way. And also, I should mention my dad was an entrepreneur.
Mhm.
So growing up, I also was like, that influenced me, of
Yeah.
course. And so, being at the hospital, I felt this like it was like this gnawing thing that was like, there is a better way to help these
Mhm.
patients. And it was like this voice that was like, that there's a better way.
Yeah.
Like, like, why aren't you doing it?
Yeah.
And I feel like I just hit this point where I would like show up to work and I was like, like it was just really, it just got to a point where I felt like I was like self-abandoning.
Mm. Yeah.
I was like, I just am ignoring this so much. It's hurting
Yeah.
like my soul.
Yeah.
So I was like, I have to do this. And I don't know anything about business. My entire training was science,
Yeah.
besides my dad's influence, which it was, again, his business was like a little bit different being in the engineering space,
Yeah.
of course.
Yeah.
So I felt like I was like, okay, I have
It's also
so
your
much to
parents, so
learn.
it's like
Yeah,
you
I'm not
take
gonna,
some, but you
yeah,
aren't gonna take, and you're like, "Dad, you don't
exactly.
know everything. You're, like, old school." Of course, my
Yeah.
parents were entrepreneurs too, and my
Yeah.
mom would be like, "Have you tried this?" And I was like, "I don't know about that, Mom."
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. Yeah.
"Am I taking your advice? I don't know, like, I trust
Yeah.
you, but"
Exactly. Yeah. I'm like, we're now on to computers.
Yeah. Yes.
We have AI. But yeah, so I think, I knew, yeah, I feel like I honestly went into it where like a little bit naive,
Mhm.
but I'm like so glad I did that again. Like people kept being like, you don't know anything about business. Like, what are you doing? And I feel like I was just like, whatever, I'll figure it out because I
Yeah.
like trust myself enough. And I'm like so grateful because I've learned so much about business,
Yeah.
and I still have so much to learn and I recognize that. But I feel like there's also a point where you're like, I trust myself that I can
Sure.
like learn
Absolutely.
it.
Well, I also even those with who now are able to go into school and college formal education around entrepreneurship, I still think they can't even touch the tip of the iceberg and what you
Right.
actually have to learn and what we're doing and what we're navigating because you go into other fields and you're learning your one skill and your one lane. We
Mhm.
come into these worlds expected to spread across 20 different lanes of not
Mhm.
just doing what you're doing, the genetic side,
Yeah.
but the bookkeeping and the sales and the
Mhm.
marketing and all these different sides
Yeah.
of a business to run the business. Is the involvement of what you thought you were going to start still the same, or have you started to even pivot since like that first idea?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I feel like I've definitely pivoted and I'm still pivoting all the time. I feel
We
like
all are.
yeah.
We all are. It's
And
okay.
I feel like that's the fun of it,
It is. It is.
Because I feel like entrepreneurship is really just being like, what's like, oh, this isn't working. That's fine. I'll
Yeah.
find a way that is,
Yeah. Yeah.
And also like speak about the evolution that like you have to go through to be an entrepreneur
Hmm.
too. I feel like you literally have to abandon and like get so uncomfortable so many
Oh,
times
so
over
many
and
times.
over.
Yeah.
Like I thought I was pushing myself before in self-work and now I'm like, I didn't even like go where I needed
You
to
have to
go.
be willing to dive into risk so courageously, be able to take on fear and know that you will get to the other side of it.
Yeah.
And at the same time, have to be able to stop and realize when to celebrate and when to take those moments to be like, I did it. Because it's easy to just keep
So
jumping to the next thing and the next thing.
I love that. Yeah, so important. That's like a big thing I'm still like trying to incorporate
Yeah.
too is, not on to the next, like take a moment,
Yeah, take a moment and say,
Like I
like,
did
I
it.
did
I'm
that.
here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. The business model we are all at today is a business model we dreamed about a year ago. From the day one, we dreamed of where we are. Like I always
Mhm.
say, a lot of people in my community and around my world and ethos of even when networking, like, but I'm still not here. I'm only
Mm.
making this much money. And I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, but when you started, you were making zero money from your idea. At this
Mhm.
point, you are making that much money. It's not your goal yet, but you are
Mhm.
making money from an idea that you had. Like, there's
Yeah.
so much power in that that I don't
Right?
think enough of us stop to be like, I am making money from an idea in my head is now
Mhm.
paying me and covering whatever it's covering, and eventually will grow to make you more money, give you the dream life that you want to.
So true.
So it's funny, we're talking about the evolvement of ourselves and the
Mhm.
self development and being an entrepreneur, how it really throws us into that. I personally had a lot of things come up on this entrepreneur journey and things that I knew were going to come up and things that I've been like, what is that?" Like,
Yeah.
and for me, and I think you also kind of struggled with this. One for me was ADHD, was one of mine. And then
Mm.
dyslexia, I also slightly suffer with that a little bit because my
Mhm.
dad had dyslexia and ADHD. And I didn't ever suffer with it when I was younger. Like, I don't remember big I can't say like I was an A+ student, but I wasn't a
Mm.
bad student. I showed up if I could have wanted to apply myself better, I think I would have done well, but I
Mm.
did well, like in
Mhm.
okay, and got myself through school and
Yeah.
was really social, and I knew early on I needed a network to get myself where I needed to and build relationships. But in
Mhm.
entrepreneurship, my ADHD has came out in an insane way of
Mhm.
like being able to sit down and focus and balancing the phone calls into deep work, into a project, going to an event. Like at the end
Mhm.
of the day, some days my head just felt like it was spinning and still spins. So I've had to build a lot of things to protect myself in those ways. And
Mhm.
numbers is one of them as well that I've realized like I have to really sit down and focus on numbers, and it makes me uncomfortable sometimes. And so I will avoid it
Yeah.
versus leaning into it.
Yeah, I think that's so good.
Yeah.
I feel like yeah, so I have dyslexia too. Yeah, I think, also I feel like when I so for me, I feel like when I was younger, that kinda led me to also, like I think, talking about this, it's like this complex of, like, proving
Mhm,
yourself. I feel like I was basically just always trying to be like, I'm gonna prove everyone wrong,
mhm.
always. And I feel like, yeah, just really having to, one, figure out ways to get creative and like do what makes sense for you,
Yeah.
like uniqueness
Yeah.
and like really even just mindset of realizing like like part of this is what makes me different for the better,
Yes.
like
Yeah.
thinking different and thinking own unique ways. Yeah, the other piece of just like having that realization
Mhm.
of like all of these things, like I've really, and I feel like the last time we talked this year it's really hit me this like kind of balance between masculine and
Mhm.
feminine.
Mhm.
I think a lot of my life I was so in my masculine, like
Mhm.
prove, prove, prove.
Yeah.
Like, the family, the dislike, like all these pieces like made me into this like the only thing that makes it like the only way I'm worthy is if I like prove
Yeah.
am I like
Get this
climbing the
paper, get this
ladders.
yeah, get this grade, have this title.
Exactly,
Yeah.
yeah. So I feel like it's really hit this year, especially that like really feminine energy is like the
Mhm.
power, just really having a balance and like the feminine energy allows us to like run our businesses without
Mhm.
burnout and like lead in such a unique way and
Yeah.
get creative. So I feel like that's been huge for me like this
Realizing
year.
we don't have to wake up at 7 a.m. or the 5 a.m. club and then do
Yeah.
the 10 p.m. club. I'm like,
Yeah.
that's not me. I
I
ain't trying to
know.
prove myself.
Yeah.
Or even when I meet women and honestly men a lot when I go to events, like, oh, I was up at 5, I hit the gym, I did all these things. I'm
Mhm.
hustling, and I'm like, good for you. I'm
Yeah.
not. I'm
Yeah.
have to build differently because I
Totally.
won't be able to be sustained at those levels. I know I
Totally.
won't. I will
Exactly.
fall to the ground into pieces if I don't
Yeah.
listen to how I want to build, which I do think is a feminine energy that we have to take into it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. That
Yeah.
was like me, and I will even say like that was me last year where I
Yeah.
was like grind, grind, grind.
Yeah.
And then I hit a point we had like a chaotic kind of year, honestly, like
Yeah.
lots of high highs, low lows. And I hit a point where I was burnt out and I was
Mhm.
like, I don't even remember why I started this? I'm like, I don't feel good. Why did I do
Yeah.
this?
Yeah.
And then I realized like, oh yeah, like you're in control.
Yeah.
Like that's the amazing part of
Yeah.
entrepreneurship. And then yeah, just really like bringing in more time for creativity and rest.
Yeah.
And then, like, having that recognition, like, "Oh, yeah, actually, I probably will perform much better."
If I just take
With
the nap or take the break or
yeah,
like
take
start
the break.
later or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And your husband is also an entrepreneur, which is
Yes.
like a whole nother balance of things and regulation and risk and money and the financials and like what are we both doing? Because when you're both on your highs, it probably feels like nothing can touch you. But when you're
Mm.
both on your lows,
Yeah.
like have you experienced some of those times where you're both on your lows and like of how do we pick each other up and how do we both stay in it?
Oh, love this question because I don't work directly with my husband, and, like, shout out to the to
No.
the couples that work together.
Sometimes I'm like, I wish my boyfriend Dan would, and other days I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm really glad we don't.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I'm like, I can't imagine because 'cause we're already so
Yeah.
intertwined. I think for us too, it's really interesting because we are such different entrepreneurs. So he actually is so much in the so I love astrology too.
Yeah,
I feel
yeah.
like but I'm a Sag, so
Okay.
I feel like I'm like very like go go go,
Don't yeah.
and he's a Libra, so he's
Okay.
like balance,
Yeah.
which is like obviously like I mean not obvious, which is a big reason I feel like I love our relationship
Mhm.
so much because he really like helps we balance each other
Yeah.
out in
Thankfully for
entrepreneur.
him to
Yeah.
balance you out.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, bring me down.
Yeah.
But I think with entrepreneurship, it took me, I actually had to, like, this was just so recent too that this happened where I had this realization where we're not going to be doing it the same. And that's okay.
Mhm.
I think a lot of times I was like, no, you have to go quick and do it this way and that way and go, like, why are you going so slow? And he's like, I'm making the best decision.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's been a big thing too for our relationship is being like, okay, we will like do things
Yeah.
differently and like that's okay.
Yeah.
And then supporting each other in
Yeah.
those ways, you
Yeah.
know?
Because it's true. I feel like, let's say you were like really big into like a focus of marketing in your business right now, right? And it's
Mm-hmm.
so easy to think, want to put that onto your partner as like, I'm doing this. You should
Yeah.
do this. We both got to focus in on this, like to get everyone excited, but realizing that he is on his different path. And I think that happens a lot in relationships. And I don't think enough people talk about the fact that it's a lot of the time you might be deep into your self development and he, she, they, whoever you're with, might not be there and
Mhm.
wanting to be there
Mhm.
and can't be there right now. But so often I feel like, especially I always say my single friends put someone, they're like, I want a man who's just as
Yes, I
developed,
love
who's on
this.
this journey as me
Yeah.
and in this exact same place. And I'm like,
Mhm.
but why? Why can't we just know that he might have done it at one point in his life, but he's somewhere else right now and you're there right
Mhm.
now? And once you date, he could go high up in that and you're going to be at a different place in your life and not ready to like read all the books, do all the podcasts, do all the things, and you're going to be below. And every now and then you are going to be on this equal level. And I think there's a lot of magic once you're there, but a lot of the times we're going to be at different stages. And I can imagine in the entrepreneur side of like both being on those journeys together, it feels a lot the same.
Yeah, you just like spoke directly
Yeah.
to our relationship. I'm like, thank you.
Yeah, because I mean,
It's
yeah,
huge.
I speak personally because I do a lot
Mhm.
of self-development stuff because of business and stuff, and my boyfriend isn't necessarily like he's not gonna sit down with me and write
No.
his 2026 vision board and,
Yeah.
like, do that. It's just
Oh,
not
no.
it's not him, and that's
Mhm.
okay. He has other ways, but I can find myself if I'm reading a book or listening to a podcast,
Mhm.
like, 2 months later, he might
Mhm.
start to get curious about it, and
Yeah.
then, like, I'll see him listening or reading something else, and I'm like, "Huh, maybe I had a
Yeah.
little influence there." And
Right.
then other times he's, really focused even more on like his health recently. And I feel like
Mhm.
I'm catching up to where he's at in that just because I have so much space I'm holding for something else right now.
Totally. No,
Yeah.
I love that so much.
Yeah.
I feel like that's been like such a big thing for us.
Yeah.
And like realizing like you can't really push, it's not helpful for anyone for you to push your ways onto someone?
No.
So I'm also like,
Yeah.
that's been a big thing to just be like, okay, like this is what works for me. And yeah, just really being like, okay, we are different people and we'll probably be on same page. And I think that's so like, I think I talk about it's such a balance because I have the same thing where my single friends are like, this is my exact
Yeah.
list. And I'm like, the thing is though, you will grow together. You
Yeah.
grow together and at different times and speeds,
Yeah.
like you were saying.
Yeah.
I feel like that was a huge thing for me to realize too, is like when
Same.
you're in the long haul,
Yeah.
the same, like you could change so much within a day.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like, yeah.
Absolutely. And I like I say that a lot to my single friends as well. And they're different
Mhm.
dating and they're just looking for like this Mr. So perfect. Now, reflect on yourself. Are you perfect as well?
Yeah.
Because if we all look at ourselves, none of us are perfect.
Mhm.
And you might be, 5-star in all the categories you're looking for him, but the categories he's looking for you from, you actually might be 2 stars in those categories. And so it's like looking to show up and knowing that we navigate health at different times. People passing in our lives affects our lives, our own weight journeys and stuff. And I was like, I went through a really hard health struggle at some point in my relationship with having fibroids and having to get a hysterectomy. And so my weight
Mhm.
and my hormones, everything was so off. I was like a bleeding mess chaos. And like, but when I first started dating him, I was healthy and fit and
Mhm.
felt really good. And then so for him to just like so easily, someone could be like, oh, that's not what I want to deal with right now. But we navigate them together.
So
Yeah.
true. Yeah, so true.
Okay. So bringing it back into the entrepreneur journey, let's get into some of the genetics stuff. So Golden Genetics is your company, and explain it a little bit more in the beautiful basic way that you explained it the other day. And also, I guess, I think what really helped me was kind of comparing it to some of the things that are on the market that you're like, but also totally not like.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, totally. Okay, so basically, we help translate the genetic information to patients so they can use it to actually be actionable.
Okay.
We always say that we help patients utilize their genetics to optimize 4 different categories. So those 4 categories of health are personalization. So
Mhm.
that's what works for you individually, not your friend or the influencer. The second is prevention. So this is about actually preventing disease that you might be predisposed to from occurring in the first
Mhm.
place. The third is proactivity. So we know that not all diseases are preventable.
Mhm.
We also know that we can live a perfect lifestyle and have something come up,
Yeah.
randomly. And
Yeah.
so proactivity is about catching things early. And we know things caught early is a different story than things caught
Yeah.
late. I always say, giving the example of cancer, if
Yeah.
cancer's caught early, it's usually surgery. If cancer caught late, it's usually radiation, chemo, and
Mhm.
surgery.
Yeah.
And it might not work. So, and then the last P is precision medicine. So that's being precise with what you are using from a medicine standpoint. And we use various genetic tests to accomplish this goal. Genetic testing has kind of exploded from we basically sequenced the whole genome, which just means we figured out every piece of the DNA in the human body, like mid 2000s.
Yeah.
Actually, I guess we would say early 2000, very early 2000s. I'm like, where are we? What year is it? 2050. And when we did that, genetic testing became more accessible and also more affordable.
Yeah.
And so there became genetic tests that went on the market direct to consumer,
Mhm.
like 23andMe and Ancestry, but now health related
Yeah.
tests. But this has caused the genetic testing world to step out of the health space
Yeah.
and more into like an unregulated, I would say like sales and marketing space, to be
Yeah.
honest, a
Yeah.
lot of times.
Yeah.
And I will say there's a lot of direct to consumer companies, or not a lot. There's some genetic testing companies direct to consumer that are doing great things and we appreciate them. But
Yeah.
there's a lot that are charging thousands of dollars for a couple genes that like might not matter to the
Yeah.
person. So our role as genetic counselors who are integratively trained is to first assess what genetic tests would be best for you. And then we help interpret that and actually apply it to your life
Yeah.
from those 4 categories. But what that really means is like, how can we optimize your nutrition? How can we optimize your movement style? What tools can you use from a lifestyle perspective? Supplements, even medications, since we have a test that can look at how your DNA responds to medication. So
Just so wild.
yeah, so I know,
Yeah.
and it's so underutilized.
Yeah.
I was always saying, I always say, so yeah, so we really are like taking a look at your life and helping you get to the root of a lot of things and then optimize it in using our DNA.
There's so much to unpack there. I've got so many questions, so many things. I think the number one was you showing essentially, and she had a diagram before, so we don't have that today, but essentially how like top level some of these other ones are testing and how much further into it you are going and some of the answers you're able to get, such as being able to not have to take certain medicines or because your body reacts to them or doesn't. And I think some of us feel like I think I have a really weak system in terms of medicine, I would say, is what I think, because it affects me quite heavily, quite
Mhm.
quickly. To
Yeah.
where I have some other friends, it's like, oh yeah, I had to take 3 of that painkiller to even like get knocked out. And I'm like, just give me half. I'm
Yeah,
like, I'm
exactly.
out. And same thing with, you were talking about with working out and your muscles and what kind of muscles and the way that we develop muscles differently. I think those are so many important things when we put so much stress, and it's like you could work out for an hour and I might have to take 3 hours to get to the same point. Yet we're both on the same, well, like health plan because Instagram or TikTok told me I needed to be.
Exactly. And this is where genetics, I really believe that genetics is the key to step away from a one size fits all approach
Hmm.
and also step into proactive care rather than reactive care. So it's like really understanding your body. And I will say that majority of our patients that we see tend to report that they feel validated from the
Hmm.
genetics because I think I hear all the time, they're like, I thought it was just something that I was doing wrong, or, I thought it was just like a personality
Yeah.
trait. And I think it's so helpful for people to be like, It doesn't mean like you can't do something. It just might mean that you could benefit from doing it in a different way.
Yeah.
And it just makes sense for that person. They're like, oh, was it wasn't necessarily the problem wasn't
Yeah.
me. Like I was born with just a unique
Yeah.
code,
Yeah.
you know?
That's a great way to put it, a code. We're all
Yeah.
different codes, and
Yeah.
we just the slightest shift in one of our little codes puts us as a whole different blueprint, essentially, a whole different
Exactly.
map of what
Mm.
can help us. And even in the same, you one of our friends at that event had done your genetics testing before, and something I had learned, which I had no idea, was that Alzheimer's can skip, and some of us don't have the genes for it. And in my head, I'd always thought everyone had it, and it's either it shows itself or it doesn't show itself, and it was
Mhm.
my thought. Because I
Mm.
think a lot of people think that older people, when they start to forget that it's all Alzheimer's and dementia, some of it's just old age. There's
Mhm.
very much a different line of it, but I didn't realize that it could skip some people.
Yeah, I love this question. So, this is basically the way that genes get passed down. So,
Mhm.
we have two copies of each gene. We get one from our mom and one from our dad.
That's like basic
Yeah.
science from like elementary school. I remember that part.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So then if we think about it, I wish I had like sometimes I'll use my fingers when I describe it for
Yeah.
patients. So sometimes there's certain changes in genes that
Mhm.
can cause the gene not to work as well or have some type of impact on our body.
Okay.
So let's say like mom had like a change in one gene,
Okay.
but she has one that's kind of running quote normal,
Yeah.
we say. So when this couple has children, what can happen is sometimes the father or basically this father can pass down his like working copy.
Yeah.
And then sometimes what can happen is mom can pass down her working copy, even though she
Mm,
had one that wasn't.
gotcha. Okay.
So it's like a 50-50 in that
Yeah.
case. Other times, what can happen is if both parents have one copy that's not working, and they basically pass down both of those non-working
Yeah.
copies, that can be something called a recessive condition.
Okay.
So basically, it's all about
Yeah.
inheritance and how the gene is being passed down. But you brought up a good point in that we all have these genes, but they might be spelled differently. So that's where, and sometimes there is a protective gene against Alzheimer's that
Yeah.
gets passed down.
Mhm.
And so a lot of people don't know that either. They're like,
No.
with genetics, we can figure that out too, you know?
I
So
love
it's,
that.
yeah.
Yeah. See, those are things like none of this was ever, I think, shared in the world of like this journey
Hmm.
for me with my dad going on to it. It
Yeah.
felt like a really confused. If anything, I felt like I had to convince the doctors. I was like, he has there's something going on. And it felt like three
Interesting.
years of doctor's appointments before he got lost. And finally they're like, oh, we think he has Alzheimer's dementia. And this was before all
Yeah.
the drugs that are happening right now. And
Mhm.
there's so much movement in it and it's taken so much more
Mhm.
seriously. But it
Yeah.
was just like I was like, there is something happening with this man. I need
Mhm.
help. And it was often that rather than looking at those, giving the right tests, I'll never forget, he was really sick with like the flu. And I went into a doctor and they gave him some kind of painkiller, I want to say, some kind of heavy narcotic for his sickness. And I was like, so you want to give a man whose brain isn't working this heavy ass narcotic? What's that going to do? What are we going to get done every day? Like, absolutely not. There has got to be something else we can give him that's not going to, he's already really confused. When you put
Mhm.
him on something so strong, he's just going to be living in a lost world. And they
Mhm.
just like, it was kind of like, oh yeah, you're right. He does have Alzheimer's. Maybe we shouldn't give him this. And I was like, yes, exactly. So I will be honest, I am so curious about all these tests, like
Yeah.
truly am. And to know that I could know about myself with the cancer side, which my dad beat cancer, but that I could potentially get passed down cancer from that side, my mom's side, and then the dementia Alzheimer's from dad's side as well.
Mhm.
I'm so curious about that because I want to prevent it. But I also live in so much fear of knowing that I'm scared of what kind of anxiety it might give me, what I might do, or how it might change my life, or how I might show up in this big fear, or becoming like weird. I don't not obsessed in a bad way with my
Mhm.
health, right? Obsessed
Yeah.
in a way to where I don't feel like I can live every day like it's my last anymore and have
Mm.
fun, to where I'm just so concentrated on living a long life. So,
Mm.
what would you say for those kinds of tests? Because they give you some pretty big life aha moments, right?
Mm.
In navigating those parts.
Totally. And I also want to say that you're not alone in this fear. I hear this all the time in my
Yeah.
work.
I'm like, I'd
So,
rather live in bliss. Like, when it shows up one day, we'll deal
yeah.
with it then. But like knowing now, I'm like, what would I do with this information?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So I feel like there's two components to that. So first, we always tell people that our first step in our process is a pre-test session, we say. So in that session, it's not just about like learning more about you and your family history. It's also really getting a sense of like what you do and what you feel like you want to know and so in that session too, we're providing knowledge,
Mhm.
and then testing is always up to you. So we always say that too. So I think a lot of people, we always recommend people doing the pre-test session.
Yeah.
And then our goal is never to pressure anyone. So for some people, that means testing for how to optimize their medications, but maybe not testing for disease risk. And that's okay.
Yeah.
A lot of people think like if they come to us, they have to do it all.
Yeah.
But again, like we're picking the tests, it's very personalized in what we pick even.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. And then the second piece is I do like to support patients with the idea that a lot of like basically this information it's already like we already have this in our body. So it's, whether or not to know this information.
Mhm.
And so our job is to really help the patient feel empowered
Okay.
with knowing what to do about it
Mhm.
and then letting go.
Yeah.
So for example, we know like certain things can lower risk by a lot, and they can be simple things like taking an omega-3 every day, for example.
Which I learned from your presentation. It's on my list of things to go by.
Yeah, exactly. Like little things. And we can even talk about,
Mhm.
yeah. And then, like we know, like for some people, this works. Like we know sauna reduces risk by 66% of Alzheimer's too. Like just saunaing.
So apparently I need to go to the spa more often, friends.
Yeah.
The sauna, that's so interesting.
Yeah, because they think it's basically heat shock proteins inhibit amyloid plaque development. So,
Oh.
but like little things like that where we basically will help support the patient with what's going on from a research perspective. What are little things that you can implement
Mhm.
during your day that reduces risk? And then the second piece is, okay, now can you feel good knowing you're doing these things that are helping, and then go enjoy life
Yeah.
and make sure you're enjoying, like, because if you look at the blue zones too, which everyone's been talking about, basically researching how people are living long. I would say, honestly, in my opinion, the biggest thing that came out of that is the realization that lack of stress is
Mhm.
extremely beneficial for
Yeah.
your health and longevity.
Yeah.
And therefore, like, obviously stress being not healthy. So
Yeah.
our thing too is like, we don't want you to be more stressed
Yeah.
about the health.
Yeah.
So it's really, and then how can we enjoy, like, get community and like incorporate joy into our lives and not be perfect. Like the goal is never, prevention is like never about perfection,
Yeah.
Because if you become too worried about perfectionism, then it's actually worse for your health,
Yeah.
So our thing is really like supporting you with, okay, I'm doing these little things that are supporting me, and now I can like let go and like also, live and enjoy life.
Yeah. And also know what you're doing. That's the thing I think I've gotten out of it. Know what you're doing is actually doing something rather than just hoping,
Exactly.
wondering, right?
Yeah.
It's like these different supplements we have. And I'm like a medium because I did grow up more in the naturopath of like educated versus just some of them. And it's not going too wild. But I have some friends that have got some supplement stores that are just absolutely insane. And the amount of money they're spending is absolutely insane to me. And there's also, it's almost, and sometimes some of them have forgotten to have fun and to just enjoy and let themselves eat the thing that will bring them so much happiness rather than stress so much about how it's going to affect their body or what it's going to do to themselves. It's like we're in like almost a generation, specifically women. I'm 37, so in this age, and a lot of friends trying to have babies, it's like they're trying to be so optimal. And I'm like, all of our moms were having some great babies, having a lot of fun out there and just really enjoying life. And I think there has got to be a little bit more balance.
Yeah.
Do you think you see that as like almost like a trend that will come back? Or like, do you think the obsession will almost come away and it'll be more like, let's try and do a little bit of both? And that's because we actually have data. So we're not just doing all of the things. It's like you can almost do a quarter of it, get the same impact, and then that if you enjoyed your life a little bit more, you're actually going to be healthier in the end.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, I fully agree with that. And I think that's such an important piece. It's like the slice of cake that you're having at your friend's birthday.
Yeah.
It's gonna, like, that is more beneficial to your health because you're enjoying it and being like in community, if that's what you want at the time.
Yeah.
Than like avoiding it and then being like very worried about perfection. And then it's just, I think it's really just like about balance is key.
Mhm.
And then, like you said, I think really understanding you and your body from a genetic standpoint can really help you like also tap into like what you need to pay attention to and what you don't, which
Mhm.
I think helps with sometimes I understand where the obsession comes from. Like I feel like I've been there too
Yeah.
when I first started studying this, where I was like, oh my God, like, this is harmful. I can't do it, like
Yeah.
little things. But now I feel like now that I understand like my genetics and like my body, it's
Mhm.
like, oh, now I'm making decisions from this place of like, oh, well, I know that works for me and this works for me. And like, and I can kind of like release, enjoy.
Rather than taking 200 supplements, you can take 10
Yeah.
and feel just as good and spend a quarter
Mm-hmm.
of the money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the biggest one I know because, like, I know some of the girls at the other event were like that had done the testing with you. Like, oh, I cut down so many of the supplements I thought I was buying
Hmm.
and the quality of the supplements they were buying, and that
Yeah.
we all, I'm
Yeah.
sure, buy, and just really taking the targeted ones. And it can actually save you time and the mental load of just being like, I'm taking these 10 today. And because
Mhm.
I know they all are tied to something versus I'm taking these 20 in hopes that I'm shooting for something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And sometimes sometimes people are taking supplements that are harmful for their body
Yeah.
even. And I'm like, "Wait, you're doing work, they're
Yeah.
trying to fix." Like I always bring up this one's like an obvious example, so I bring up sometimes people have genes that make it hard for them to break down histamine,
Mhm.
and some probiotic strains
Mhm.
produce a lot of histamine. And
Interesting.
so women will come to me with like these really signs and symptoms of histamine intolerance, and we'll
Mhm.
do their genetics. They have issues with histamine. And I'm like, well, actually, we should switch you to a safer probiotic.
Yeah.
Your gut, like you're taking
Yeah.
this thing you found on Instagram, but it's actually not going to help you. It's going to hurt you,
Yeah.
So it's like that
I
too.
was just talking to a girlfriend of mine who suffered with PCOS, hadn't had it show up for a long time, and got on the creatine phase that everyone's into, started taking creatine like crazy. And all
Mm,
of a sudden her PCOS like started flaring and like
mm,
bulging out of her body. And it was like, where did this come from? All of a sudden she was about to get a hysterectomy. And she was at that point, she was like, I'm fine with this. But so her doctor was like, okay, you need to come off the creatine, like come off these
mhm.
things. And she, rather than waiting until the last minute, she needed to do it like before surgery. She just was like at that appointment, stopped taking it. And all of a sudden that issue went away. And
Yeah.
she went, hold on. I think that the creatine might have been, and she started researching, talking to her doctor, and it was essentially squeezing the muscles and
Mm,
making them tighter, which was making her PCOS and
mm.
her like muscles around her stomach start to make her PCOS flare up. And
That's so
that's like, yeah, that's
fascinating.
one of those, I think,
Yeah.
where it's like, we're all creatine's great for all of us. Everyone needs it, but for in her instance, it wasn't something she needed. Or at that level
Hmm.
of how much she was taking.
Exactly. Yeah. And I love that because I think even when we're talking about prevention and like looking at the research of what's out there, we still need to take into account the other personalization
Mm-hmm.
piece. And so it's like, okay, then I always say like we're personalizing the prevention then too, because it's like, sometimes sauna doesn't work for people,
Mm-hmm.
So I
Yeah.
think that's like, I won't bring up that recommendation for some
Yeah.
people if they have like heat issues and stuff.
Yeah. Well, I'm just gonna start going to the sauna every day. If my gym
I
has a
love it.
sauna, I'm in.
Okay,
Take
amazing.
omega-3 and sauna, here I
Yeah,
come.
exactly. You're set.
Um, being a woman in the medical industries and STEM is such a brave moment in a place where you really, I do have to prove yourself because it is still very much a man's world. I guess, what are some of your favorite moments of that? And what are some of the moments that you're hoping can change in the future?
Yeah, such a good question. Yeah, I think gosh, it's still I feel like the STEM field is still so dominated by men and
Mhm.
I mean that's like in many fields.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think and also I think for me it's pushed me to like face maybe like do more shadow work and
Mhm.
really I think like just being in this place of like okay, like can I really find love for all these parts because you do get pushed into situations like my past role, I was, in situations where I would have to speak about a patient
Mhm.
to like basically talk about a patient to majority of, white men
Yeah.
doctors in the
Yeah.
room.
Yeah.
Also, I was like probably 20 to 30 years younger.
Yeah.
And I have, I think I have these complexes. Like I look young. I was like, it's like, do you wear makeup? Like
Yeah.
sometimes women in STEM too, it's like almost like if you wear makeup and you wear like, and you don't have glasses and you like look like, I feel like we have this like, oh, they'll not take me as
Yeah.
seriously. Like I'm not a
Wear like a
scientist.
different color, like a little bit
Yeah.
brighter and show up a
Yeah.
little bit the gold hoops, those
Yeah,
kinds of things. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, and I feel like I'm still in a place, honestly, where I'm, like, really trying to get to the
Mhm.
point where I'm like, I don't feel like I have to, basically lead from a place of, like, my degrees or, like, and I do wear my glasses a lot.
Yeah.
I think also that's aesthetic, so
Yeah,
but
that's
even
fine.
just,
Yeah.
resisting the urge to wear them out of a place of, like,
I
like,
have
I
to
have to
prove
prove
myself. Yeah.
yeah, and, like, showing up, like, I like to wear makeup for me,
Mhm.
like, being okay with that?
Mhm.
But, yeah, I think and there's so many statistics too about, I think just, like, the differences of men versus women in STEM. But
Yeah.
my hope is that I think really like women being in I think there's so much power of a woman coming into a building, like feeling, or like into a room of, maybe the situation of feeling like so full and like so much love for herself.
Hmm.
There's nothing to prove. And I actually feel like that's almost more powerful and like such a gift to the
Yeah.
world than like coming in from this place of like, I swear I'm important,
Yeah.
Because it's just, yeah, it's this ability to just know that you're important just as you are,
Yeah.
and you have something to offer. So I think, yeah, just really hope that women can get to that place of less, having to feel like they have proof and
Yeah.
more just like I have so much like love for myself and I'm
Yeah.
going to show up and this is my passion. That's why
Yeah.
I'm doing
And
it,
I can show up in a feminine way, the way I
Yeah.
want to,
Mm-hmm.
and be respected and
Yeah.
know that I've done the work and I don't need to
Mm-hmm.
prove it or double down on my work. It's just I walk into
Exactly.
the room and get to lead the same respect. I personally would like to see a future where products that are specific to women's bodies are
Yeah.
designed and researched by women from the start.
Mm-hmm.
It's so crazy that half these products and the birth controls and things that women
Yeah.
were using in our bodies were created by men who,
Mm-hmm.
as much research as they can do, they have no idea what it has to be have our body parts and the feelings and the hormones and things we have going on. And the biggest thing I can speak to is I used to not care about having a male OBGYN. It really didn't bother me when it was just like normal checkups and things. And then
Mm-hmm.
once I started having the fibroid issues in the history, the minute the man like told me what I need to do with my body, I looked at him and I was like, no, this is my last appointment. You'll have no idea. He was like, no, I know what you're doing. And I was like, but you don't, and you
Yeah.
never will. You
Yeah.
don't know what it's like to bleed for 22 days, and you can't tell me it's going to be okay. So, like,
Mm-hmm.
have a nice day. And I walked out of the office to the front desk and I was like, I'd like to change my doctor, please.
Yeah.
And they were like, why? I was like, because he's a man and he'll never understand what's going on with my body. And there's so many products women are using that we're
Yeah.
told. And I just, I can't wait to see a world where all these products are designed, researched by women and see how we feel different.
Yeah. I think that's
Yeah. And even to
such
the
an important.
effect of women with Alzheimer's towards men's with Alzheimer's. They're two
Yeah.
different stories, right? Because we have hormones that mess with it, and it's a whole nother level that we have to go through. Well,
100%.
I have loved this conversation so much today. Before we wrap up, where can the people in our world who are like, I need this. I want to know more about my genetics. I want to start, diving into my health to make better choices for myself. Where can they find you? What does that process look like? And
Yeah.
ways to connect with you?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I've loved it too.
Yeah.
I think, okay, so basically the first step in our process is you'll always book a call with one of our team members. And the reason we do this is because there's so many tests out there. There's so many indications we could see you for. We really need to understand what package like fits you best. We
Hmm.
don't like, I think something that we're proud of is we don't have one package for everyone.
Yeah.
We don't have one protocol for everyone. Like everything is
Yeah.
personalized to the T. So if you're interested, you can find the link to book that call on our website. So it's www.goldengeneticshealth.com. My Instagram is genetics with Natalie. That is like my personal, I share a lot, but also business, and you
Hmm.
can find links on there too. And then our business Instagram is Golden Genetics Health. And if you have any questions too, just know I'm always here to answer and talk first.
Amazing. Thank you so
Yay.
much.
Thank you.
Honestly, I'm telling you, friends, it's coming up this year. I'm gonna get over the fear, and I am so curious. And to be honest, even leaning into the Alzheimer's side, but for me, it's like the supplements and the different things I can do to just make sure
Right.
that what I'm doing in my everyday is the maximum that I can get out of the time I have because your girl's busy. Like, if I don't gotta be doing all the things that I need to be doing every day and I can cut that down or whatever it
Mhm.
might be, or like if the sauna is something that truly like I just know I gotta pack that and make a priority to do that
Yeah.
versus thinking that I gotta go for a 2-hour run instead, right? I'd
Yeah.
much rather sit in a sauna for 7 minutes.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for today.
Thank
Honestly,
you.
just also this podcast, even more, I think, shows from the way you take something that can be so complicated and so overwhelming and make it distilled down to something that feels like we can all understand and know about. So thank you for reminding us that knowledge is power and it doesn't have to be super heavy. So thank you so
Oh,
much.
thank you. Thank you
Yeah,
so much
of
for having me.
course. Thank you so much for listening, Biz Bitches. And we will see you on the next episode. If you like this one, please rate, review, subscribe. Tell us what you want to hear more about, more conversations like this, or from other entrepreneurs in your world. Bye, bitches.